Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the third part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 4, Help. Isa Tsuneo has had his fair share of problematic patients. It comes with the territory. People came to therapists like him to help them with problems in life. From stress, depression, regret, and bad choices in life. People come to him if they realize they need help to turn their lives around, and his current client is no different. Okay, there were some issues to start with, but over the past 3 months, he had seen some significant improvements from his young client. So, tell me again, the moment you believe everything started to go downhill for you? Isa asked calmly. His client sighed. When I was 4 when my quirk first manifested, Katsuki Bakugo replied, laying back on the sofa as he examined his hands. Everyone around me thought it was great, as did I. Even Izumi thought it was great. And yet, despite praising me, I treated her like shit. And why did you start bullying Izumi? Isa asked. It started after we went for a walk in a forest with some friends, Katsuki replied. I fell off a fallen tree trunk into a shallow river below, and she came down and offered to help me. At the time, my young, idiotic mind thought she thought I was weak, so I lashed out at her. And I kept lashing out at her for the next 10 fucking years. Calling her a quirkless Deku, beating her, using my quirk on her. Telling her to jump off a fucking building. He shouted before he stood up and walked around the room. I was allowed to get away with this shit. No one bothered to get in the way as they didn't want to get in the way of such a promising individual. So they let it continue and ignored it because, in their eyes, I could do no wrong and didn't care what happened to the one quirkless girl in school. For 10 years, I bullied the first friend I ever made. All because I thought she looked down at me and for being quirkless. No one stopped me. No one took me to the side and told me what I was doing was wrong and unheroic. That I wasn't acting like a fucking hero despite drilling it into the heads of everyone around me that I was going to be the #1 hero one day. Heroes don't just fight villains. They save people, too. I just never noticed it until now. I was always too focused on the fighting, watching heroes like All Might beat up villains, never noticing that they were saving people too. I wanted to be the #1 hero, just like All Might. But All Might never went about telling quirkless children to jump off a fucking building. Someone should have known that what I was doing was unheroic, that I was acting more like a villain than a hero. But they didn't. And now I'm stuck in this bullshit situation after telling a girl to jump off a fucking building. Yes, that's it. Let it all out. Isa said calmly. The boy had a lot of pent-up frustration and anger, and let it out like this helped calm him down. Katsuki sighed, breathing heavily as he sat back down. I think I did, he said before he gave himself a few moments to cool down. The teachers at Aldera Middle School should have known what I was doing was wrong, that I wasn't acting like the hero I so often said I would become. They're teachers, for fuck's sake. They're supposed to look after the students under their care, not prioritize my future over that of a quirkless girl. I'm glad I won't have to deal with their bullshit anymore. Most of the staff were arrested for negligence. And how's Aldera been since Izumi left? Isa asked. It was good that the kid was getting this off his chest. It's far too easy just to bottle up these emotions and let them fester for too long. Well, the new teachers are a lot more observant this time, actually calling me out for my shit, Katsuki replied as he lay on the sofa. The students, not so much. They're all glad she's gone, but unfortunately, it's for all the wrong reasons. They're glad that the quirkless Deku is no longer around to mess up their progress. Some of them are even disappointed that she survived her suicide attempt. It's almost horrifying how much some of the students hate her. I'm glad none of them will be coming with me to UA next year. Or Shiketsu High if I fail to get into the former. Oh, that's a change from last time, Isa remarked. Last time you said you were adamant about getting into UA. That was when we were starting. And this shit was still fresh, Katsuki said. Now that I've had time to think about it, I realize that my chances to get into UA may be slim. Aldera is not a big school but is right on UA's doorstep. Word of what happened would have reached their ears. Plus, being a hero school, they're bound to do background checks on all of their students, and mine will have some massive red flags on it. So, I have a few backup options, just in case. If anything, I think I don't deserve to go to UA. They're the top hero school in the country, and I'm the most unheroic person imaginable, he said before he closed his eyes. I'm just glad Izumi was transferred to a new school. But, I can't help but wish that it was done years ago. And why do you think that? Isa asked. Because she should have stopped following me years ago, maybe even a decade, Katsuki replied. Despite everything I did to her, she still thought I was her friend, even going as far as to try and rekindle our friendship. And yet, everywhere we went, I turned everyone against her because they all saw me as brilliant and did not want to get in my way. And when they saw me bully Izumi, they also turned on her. She asked me out once, on a date, of all things. My response to her asking me out was to blast her in the face with my quick and tell her to fuck off. I ruined any chance of her getting a boyfriend because, after that, everyone she asked out afterwards did the same thing. I don't understand why she kept trying or why she kept following me around. Do you think she kept following you because she admired you? Isa asked. Probably, Katsuki replied with a frown. She was the first person to say I had an awesome quirk, which was true. My quirk is awesome. Yet I kept treating her like shit and thinking she was useless. Did I ever say how smart she was? She was the biggest hero fan I ever knew. Whilst I was more interested in their fights, she would always be interested in their quirks. She had notebooks that she would write people's quirks, how they functioned, and how they could improve them. I never told her I got the idea to propel myself through the air with my explosions from her. She once made an offhand remark, and I rewarded her with a blast to the face telling her to shut up. I just wish I could go back in time and change how I treated her. Maybe then she wouldn't have jumped off a building. Looking back now, my reason for hating her was so bloody childish, and yet, I never tried to change. Isa nodded. In his time as a therapist, he had seen plenty of people who regretted their life choices. Sadly, most often, after their actions had caused someone else great pain and suffering. And for Katsuki, the 10 years spent bullying one girl was starting to come back to haunt him. The rest of the session continued as usual, with shouting and swearing. He had noticed that he'd been swearing a lot less since their first session. He did say he was attending anger management sessions as well, so it was good that he was receiving more than just therapy. When their session ended, Katsuki walked out without a word. His mother, Mitsuki, was waiting outside in the waiting room, sitting a few chairs away from a guy with long hair and wearing sunglasses. When Mitsuki saw her son leave the room, she stood and walked alongside him. Neither of them spoke on the way home. This was a difficult time for both of them. Inko was an old friend of Mitsuki, and it horrified her that Katsuki had been bullying Inko's daughter for so long without either of them knowing. Izumi was such a sweet girl, undeserving of such treatment. And yet, her son tormented her for 10 years without her ever knowing. Katsuki, meanwhile, was going through hell. Izumi's attempt at suicide had hit him hard. At first, he thought it was a lie she came up with to get attention, whilst the heroes, who, if we're being honest, had no right to call themselves that since they were just standing around doing nothing whilst he suffocated, told her off. But when police started investigating Aldera and arrested several of its staff for negligence, Izumi's transfer to a new school, and the massive news report about the incident, it started to look a lot more real. And it horrified him. He meant it as a joke when he commented about jumping off of a building. Although, he was starting to think that he didn't. It was shocking that he wasn't arrested too. He was the one who told her to jump, after all. Instead, he ended up in therapy and anger management sessions, something he was initially against but was now glad he was taking. Because now he had a chance of salvaging his dream of becoming a hero, just not the one he wanted to become. The number one spot would be forever out of his reach, but that felt good to him now. The old him wouldn't have agreed, but the old him didn't have to deal with the trauma caused by being directly involved in a girl's suicide attempt. He could not become just like All Might, let alone surpass him. He was too violent, too selfish. Everything he had done was to further his own goals, not anyone else's. Heroes are supposed to fight villains and help people. The old him wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have done that at all. If he wanted to become a hero, then he needed to change. Not drastically that he became a different person, just enough so that he stops calling people extras. This mess would also leave a very dark mark on his record, plus with all his wrongdoings now on his records because his old teachers kept them off it for some stupid reason, no hero school would accept him now unless he changed and improved. Nobody wants a hero who discriminates against quirkless people. There was another thing that was bothering him. Izumi. He needed to apologize to her, but he lacked the courage to do so. The last time he saw her was during that sludge villain incident. She looked broken, barely holding herself together. The hero should have been able to see her state, and yet, they pushed her too far. He didn't know how she would react to seeing him again, especially since the last thing he had said to her was to jump off a building. He decided to keep his distance from her until things for them calmed down. Then, he'll think about apologizing to her. He just hoped that, wherever she was now, life was moving a lot smoother for her. Meanwhile, Izumi collapsed face-first onto her bed, tired and worn out. She had finished combat training with Sir Night-Eye for today, and she was exhausted. It was a good thing she wasn't clearing the beach today, as she didn't have the strength to move anything right now. Who knew training to fight could be so hard, Izumi remarked, head buried into her pillow. I know I'm going to have to learn how to fight at some point, but it's not easy. Fighting never is, Durandal said, lying beside her bed. It takes years and years of training to get good at it, and you always have to keep training, lest your skills degrade. It's easier for a machine, as you can just program us, still doesn't mean we can master it easier than you can. Besides, at least you are getting trained to fight before entering UA. It'll give you a slight advantage over the other students. Izumi nodded. At least now she could do more than just punch the problem. Night-Eye said that she still had a lot of work, but at least she'll have the basics down by the time she applies to UA. Speaking of work, Night-Eye had given her a few things to do to help improve her analytical skills. Mock CCTV videos for analyst training to watch that required her to write down as much as she could about their quirk, how they were using it, and anything else that was out of the ordinary. Of course, the videos were fake, with the criminal caught on camera being an actor. They were for training purposes. Well, that's what she thought anyway. Last week he had given her an unassuming video of someone with what she was told was a telekinesis-like quirk. But, after observing the video, she realized that was not the case, and in fact, the guy had a magnetism quirk that allowed him to control magnetic objects. She didn't think much of it when she returned the completed work to him. But when a report in the news about Sir Night-Eye taking down a thief who could control magnetic objects, she got suspicious. One call later revealed that, yes, Sir Night-Eye had sent her footage from an actual investigation he was doing. As expected, Izumi was over the moon that she was able to help out Sir Night-Eye with one of his investigations. Inko, on the other hand, was a little cross that the man had done without any warning or permission but was placated a bit due to him having nothing but praise for her. Izumi's analysis of the thief's quirk made catching him much easier. But he did say that he would ask permission first the next time he wants to ask her for help like this. Which had nothing to do with her slowly bringing one of his hyperdensity seals towards her with her quirk and saying, that could easily be something else. Izumi had no idea why, after her mother said that, Sir Night-Eye crossed his legs. She suspected her mother had threatened to do something to him, but she wasn't sure what. She wasn't the only one who was improving. Hitoshi and Nito were also training as well. They were mainly getting stronger, though, as there wasn't much they could do to improve their quirks right now, not without getting into trouble. But they could do some light experimentation. Nito had found out how long he could copy someone's quirk from a loose piece of hair about a week before he could no longer copy their quirk from it. Whilst it was a good amount of time, getting people to give him a strand of their hair would be difficult at times, especially if they didn't have hair. Plus, he was still limited to 3 quirks at a time. Another problem would be identifying the hair's origin and how easy it was to lose it.
Might need to come up with something to put them in for his hero costume.
Hitoshi was more focused on physical training, as, unlike Nito, his quirk wouldn't be useful during the practical part of the exam. Izumi allowed him to practice using his quirk on her to get some practice using it.
It felt strange, she didn't know she was under his control until after he broke his control over her.
The first time he used it on her, she didn't think he had used it until she noticed she wasn't standing where she was previously. It was slightly horrifying but also rather impressive. They also discovered a few weaknesses. Whilst the target couldn't escape from his mind control, it was remarkably easy for others to break his control. Something as simple as a rough nudge on the shoulder of the target was enough to break Hitoshi's control over them. Not something to worry about in a one-on-one fight, but against several people, it wouldn't be much good at stopping them. Messing up their communications and making them mistrust their comrades' voices, on the other hand, can seriously affect their cohesion and make taking them down easier. But, even with all the work they've put in now, they still had a long way to go before the UA entrance exam, and a lot can happen in the time between. So they had to keep training to be ready for the exam. Anyway, back to her work. Once she had recovered enough from the workout, she got off her bed, sat at her desk, opened her laptop and went to work. She watched Sir Nightie's video and noted what she observed. It was a simple robbery. The thief turned his finger into a key, letting him walk in and ransack the place. Yet the most interesting thing was that the alarm never went off, not even when one of the displays was smashed open. Something smelled fishy about this. This is starting to look more like an inside job, Izumi remarked, noting her observations. Probably an attempt at insurance fraud by the owner. There are a lot of valuables in there, after all.
Durandal nodded, not speaking, knowing this was a test for Izumi.
He could see it was insurance fraud, but this wasn't a test for him.
You can't learn anything if you had a robot answering all of the questions for you after all.
In fact, it would be detrimental to her. Once Izumi was done examining the video, she sent it off to Sir Nightie before doing a little investigation of her own. She opened up YouTube and looked up a video of one of All Might's fights, specificity, his only fight against Dr. Paxton.
Well, calling that a fight would be an understatement.
It was more like an embarrassing string of Paxton sending a powerful robot to fight All Might, only for All Might to smash it up in one punch. It was hilarious how annoyed the man was getting. Sadly, All Might could not catch him there and then, as the last machine Paxton sent against All Might was a lot tougher and much harder to destroy, giving the madman his chance to escape.
"Why are you studying my creator?"
Durandal asked. "You've been looking up a lot of stuff about him recently."
"Why?"
"Because I want to learn more about you, but as you said, you don't know much about the body you're inhabiting," Izumi replied as she watched All Might effortlessly smash a robot into pieces. "If I watch what his other robots can do, it might give us more of an idea of what you are capable of." Durandal looked at the video Izumi was watching before looking back at her.
"I see your point.
This body didn't exactly come with an instruction manual," he remarked before he looked back at the video. "Plus, it feels good to see the bald fuck getting his shit kicked in."
Izumi nodded, continuing to watch the video.
Paxton was a tall and thin man with long limbs and fingers. He lacked hair of any kind on his face, even eyebrows. His eyes were covered by goggles with camera lenses on them. He looked plain, but more often or not, the plain ones are the deadly ones. He also spoke with a British accent. The madman wasn't standing, he was sitting in a small one-man fighter with VTOL functions, floating in the middle of a street, surrounded by his machines, most of which had been reduced to scrap metal. All Might standing several meters away, with even more destroyed robots around him.
Some of Paxton's best if his rather annoyed ranting was anything to go by.
All Might made dealing with Paxton look easy. Like the symbol of peace could have dealt with him there and then. If it wasn't for Paxton's All Might Buster, then his reign of terror would have ended there and then.
Unfortunately, this was just a one-off. Every other battle Paxton was directly involved in ended in either his victory or a minor defeat.
The man was a genius in more than robotics. He knew how to fight battles and win them. He also knew how to break people. Not physically, but mentally. It was no secret that he was a great therapist, but his training also helped him break people. He knew what to say to cause someone to fold in on themselves, how to say it, and when to say it. He has faced hundreds of heroes and mentally broke the ones he didn't kill. So many heroes from across the globe. Mantis, Earl Grey, Liberty, Endeavor, Medved, and many others. Whilst some like Endeavor were able to recover and return to hero work, others like Earl Grey weren't so lucky, quilting the hero job even after their recovery. Some just never recovered. She knew how dangerous Paxton was. Everyone did. But only after she started researching the man did she realize the true extent of the damage he had done. Over 5,000 heroes either dead or broken by him across the globe. Thousands died, several nations were crippled, economies ruined, and cities ruined. He brought war to the entire world, which no one prepared for. It was shocking how much damage one man could cause, how vast his empire was, and how many of his more dangerous subordinates were still unaccounted for. Many people who worked for him were arrested after he died, with more being found as time passed. They were still uncovering his bases and minions to this day, but his more dangerous minions and machines were still out there. Argonaut, Mechanist, BNK3R, Stealth, the Therapist, Arc, and many others who were still out there. Nobody knew where they were, but it was frightening to know that such dangerous individuals were still at large. Hell, the band, a group of robots that played boss music for him, were still at large. The man had a massive fucking ego and liked music playing in the background while fighting. And whilst she had to admit that the man had good taste in music, the fact he was playing it whilst his forces were killing people didn't make it any better. Although, did he need a bunch of robots to play the music live and not play it over a loudspeaker? Anyway, Paxton was dangerous, and so were his machines. His robots were all built for war and were highly versatile. It was quite easy for them to be reconfigured to perform various duties. But since Durandal was a more high-end robot, he would be different. So she focused on Paxton's more advanced machines, mainly those with positronic brains. But that turned out to be more difficult. She couldn't find anything on them besides their names and the fact they had positronic brains. She couldn't even find a video of them in action. Not even the more commonly known ones had anything on them. This reeks of a cover-up, Durandal remarked as Izumi closed another empty web page that just had a blurry image of the robot in question, its name, and confirmation that it had a positronic brain. Someone doesn't want the world to know what his high-end machines were capable of. Can't blame them. Some of them were downright terrifying, like his All Might Buster. He made that thing to kill All Might, it failed, yes, but as you saw, it gave All Might a lot of trouble before he was able to destroy it. You think someone's trying to prevent people from replicating them? Izumi asked. Probably. They were his most dangerous machines, after all, Durandal replied. Or it's one of his minions doing it, keeping their long-dead master's secrets hidden from the general public. Besides, all his robots, except the larger ones, were bipedal. He didn't have many quadrupedal ones. So chances are we're not going to learn much about what I can do from them. Izumi sighed. So you are telling me that I spent the last hour looking up his robots for nothing? Well, when you put it like that, then yeah, you kind of did, Durandal replied. At least it wasn't all for nothing. You found that compilation of him getting punched in the face and running away in his underpants to the Benny Hill theme. That was funny. For the man who caused so much chaos and killed so many, he got into a lot of embarrassing and hilarious situations. Izumi nodded with a smirk. For such an evil man, he had an embarrassing amount of hilarious fuck-ups that would have made him a laughingstock if it wasn't for all of the destruction and death he caused. Well, it wasn't all for nothing. They had found something about him by complete accident too. The loyalty program and biometric lock can be, in a way, fooled. For some reason, Durandal obeys Inko's orders without hesitation or reluctance. At first, all three of them were confused, as Paxton's biometric lock is supposed to only work for the person it's locked to. After a little testing, they found out why he was just as obedient towards Inko as he was to Izumi. She was her mother. They were related very closely, with very similar genetics.
Because of their biological relationship, the biometric lock is fooled into thinking that the order is coming from Izumi when it's really coming from Inko. Durandal theorized that Paxton never found this out because he had no family, so this weakness was overlooked. Not something that could be abused as he had no children, but it was something. There was then a knock on the door. Izumi. Her mother called from the other side. It's almost time. A massive smile formed on Izumi's face as she turned towards the door. Coming, she said loudly before she turned off her computer and rushed towards the door. Durandal followed close behind as she left her room and followed her mother towards the living room. The two sat on the sofa opposite the TV while Durandal sat on the floor in front of them. Inko got out the remote and turned on the TV, but she didn't switch the TV channel. Instead, she brought up a video telephony service they had, one capable of handling calls between the Earth and the Moon. Inko quickly imputed a code to a meeting room and waited. The main screen was black save for a small rectangle at the bottom of the screen that showed them the view of the webcam positioned on top of the TV. The two waited patiently for a few moments before the black screen changed to show a man with short fluffy red hair with freckles on his face, wearing a black shirt and sitting at a desk. A note at the top left-hand side of the screen also said, time delay, 2.5 seconds. The man smiled as he saw them. Izumi, Inko. How are my two favorite girls doing? Inko smiled. We're doing fine, dear, she said as Izumi beamed, smiling so brightly that she could have flashbanged someone with it. How are you doing yourself, Hisashi? The man smiled. I'm doing fine. We're heading back to the plant, so I have some time off until we reach it, Izumi Midoriya replied. Been a very productive month for us, and busy. Well, it's good to hear you're doing fine, Inko said, glad her husband was doing fine. Izumi Midoriya had always wanted to go to the moon, even when he was young. So, when the moon colony project started, he signed on to help with the helium-3 mining. Although he didn't expect to be one of the few to be selected to go up there. It was his dream come true. Unfortunately, by the time confirmation came through, he was selected, he had gotten married and had a child, and sadly, he couldn't bring them to the moon with him. It did not help that his daughter dreamed of becoming a hero, and she could not achieve that on the moon. So, after a long family discussion, Inko and Izumi told him to accept, as it was his dream to go to the moon, on one condition, made by a 3-year-old Izumi. Whilst he's up there, he buys any exclusive hero merch that's sold up there for her. Something he agreed to in an instant. Izumi was his darling little girl, and he wanted to do everything he could to help her achieve her dream of becoming a hero, supporting his wife and daughter despite being so far away from them. Durandal had also remarked that had Izumi been born a boy, she would have looked a lot like his father. Hisashi nodded before he turned towards his daughter. Izumi, how are things going down on your end? He asked whilst he maintained his smile. There was a hint of worry in his voice. It may have been 3 months since she tried to end her life, but he still worried about her. He so desperately wanted to visit and be with them during this trying time, but sadly he couldn't afford to go home, as return trips to the Earth and back aren't cheap. He didn't have enough holiday time to cover the trip and the time to spend with his family. So the best he could do was send a little more their way to help. I've been well, Izumi said with a smile. She always enjoyed speaking to her father. The man understood what it felt like to be told repeatedly to give up on your dream. But he had always been a source of inspection, as, despite all the odds, he archived his dream and went to the moon. It was one of the things that helped keep her going for all these years. Isa said that I've improved greatly since our first session but still have a long way to go, she said, frowning slightly, wishing her father could be here in person. But I am making progress. Hopefully, I'll be better by the time I apply to UA. I've been training a lot, too. That's good to hear, Hisashi said with a smile, glad his daughter was recovering. He was horrified when he found out what had happened to her and how the school she attended did nothing to help or stop the bullying. A part of him wished that he never went to the moon. That way, he would have been down there to help her, which might have hurt her drive to become a hero. Remember, don't be disheartened if you don't manage to get into the hero course on day 1. You still have the UA Sports Festival to prove your worth as a hero. Izumi nodded frantically with a smile on her face. Not a year went by that she didn't watch the UA Sports Festival, as it was an opportunity for the students there to show off their quirks. Another reason for holding the sports festival so early into the year was to give students who didn't do well during the entrance exam but still want to become heroes a chance to get onto the hero course. Many useful quirks aren't useful in fighting robots, so they often fail to get in. The festival gives them another chance at that. Even if she failed, then she would still have another chance. It was the same story for almost every top hero school in the world: the Millennium Academy in Germany, Guardian High School in Russia, Great Britain's prestigious Helsing High School, and the Avengers Academy in America, just to name a few. And yes, she also watched their sports festivals to see their students' quirks in action. Don't worry. I'm aware it is possible and am prepared for it, Izumi said. But I have Durandal with me as well, so I should be fine, she said as her robot companion raised his head. That's the spirit, Hisashi said with a smile. And how's your friend Durandal doing? Still keeping an eye on you? I've still been making sure she's safe, if that's what you're worried about, Durandal replied. He didn't say much during these meetings, preferring to speak only if Hisashi talked directly or if the conversation involved him. Apart from a few places, I haven't left her side, those places being the girls' changing room and toilets. The other girls didn't like having him come in with her and kept telling her to leave him outside, and since she didn't want to make any enemies, she complied without a word. Well, I'm glad you're looking after my baby girl. She needs all the help she can get right now, Hisashi said as his smile faded slightly. I don't know what I would do if I lost either of you two. Inko nodded. She knew just how much her husband loved them, and whilst it was heartbreaking that he couldn't be there for them, he was doing his best to help his daughter during these trying times. Oh yes, father, that package you sent us arrived yesterday, Izumi said with a smile, brightening the mood. Finally, Hisashi said, sounding relieved. He'd been waiting for that to arrive for over 2 months now. I was wondering when it would reach you. Did you enjoy the gifts I sent you too? We did, Izumi said as she and Inko nodded. Hisashi had sent Izumi a lot of hero merch exclusively sold on the moon, including a limited edition of All Might in his fictitious Luna costume. A what-if costume that was designed just in case All Might needed to go to the moon. Inko meanwhile got, among a few other things, a new sewing machine since the old one broke and she wanted to get back into sewing, also some fabric to practice with. That's good to hear, Hisashi said with a smile. Glad to see you two like the gifts. I wish I could do more, but I'm still stuck up here. Don't worry, I will be with you sometime next year. Just stay strong for me, Izumi. We'll get through this together. Izumi smiled. Thank you, father, she beamed, happy tears falling from her eyes. Despite being so far away, Hisashi has been the most supportive of her, doing everything he could to help her. I love you. I love you too. Both of you, Hisashi said with a smile before he looked to the left quickly. And that's all the time I have available, sadly, he said, looking back towards them. I'll talk to you girls next week, he said before waving them goodbye, Inko and Izumi doing the same before he ended the call. Izumi waited a few moments before she put an arm around her mother and hugged her closely whilst petting Durandal. Seeing her father always put a smile on the young girl's face. Even though he was hundreds of thousands of miles away, the man still cared deeply for his family. And next year, he was coming home. Just you wait, Father Izumi thought with a smile, I will make you proud. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 4. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.